In the book of Genesis, chapter 11, verses 1 to 9, the great and anonymous masters of the fantasy novel tell us about how humanity tried to build a great tower in hopes of reaching the house of God. Of course, God, in his Old Testament wrath, found the whole thing to be profoundly offensive and arrogant. And so the good Lord did as a good Lord does, and he cast a spell on man. A spell that caused man, hitherto united under one tongue, figuratively speaking, of course, start speaking in different languages. Unable to understand each other, they abandoned the Babel project and scattered all over the world like confused cockroaches. And so time, that merciless bleach that destroys memory and trauma, time went by, ruthless, purifying. And once again, man started contemplating new manifestations of that primordial idea to reach the house of the big boy. So they say, God created the languages of the world, and he also shuffled them. But they also say that music is the universal language of man, women, the spirits, and the angels. That harmony is the speech of the universe, and that melody has the power not just to transform hearts and stir passions, but to transform worlds. However, in Terraforming Mars, the resource management game by Jacob Frixelius, music will not transform a damn thing, no. In this game, the elements of change are bears, ants, microbes, moss, and other things. In Terraforming Mars, each player controls a corporation tasked by the world government to make the red planet habitable for the human being. To satisfy the will of this benevolent dictatorship at the same time as they fill their pockets and exploit the working man, the players will have to purchase and implement projects to raise the global terraforming parameters, namely oxygen, number of oceans, and temperature, until life in Mars is possible. And while some projects directly contribute to the general purpose, which I presume is to save humanity from the corpse of our dying Earth, others will make your corporate machine more efficient, making it produce more resources and more money. Money which you will use to invest in more powerful projects, round after round. And each round is a generation, which is a lovely touch because it immediately gives you a feeling that you are creating a cross-generational epic narrative, like a 100 years of Martian solitude, except with less poetry and more counting cubes and money. First, there's an investigation phase when we draw 4 cards and we can buy projects from the inventors and companies that visit our ridiculously large office. Then comes the action phase, during which players take 2 actions to pay and develop those projects. And finally, we have the production phase, when our machine produces resources and we receive the money our children will inherit in the next round. Each generation builds the foundation for the great engineering works their descendants will build on the next round, and their sons on the next one. Great-granddaughters and great-grandsons will wreck the giant brains within their tiny, frail bodies, thinking of the most efficient way to invest the inherited family fortune to build projects that not only will honor their forefathers, but will propel their families and their companies to the forefront of scientific innovation and the eventual economic domination of the Red Planet. But you must not be slaves to the designs of your ancestors. In this game, you must be willing to break away from the plans you so carefully laid out in your head and keep an open eye for new opportunities, new paths. You must learn how to pivot. Because that's life, is it not? My father, for example, he's a rather respected scholar. And he goes all over the world giving talks and lectures and signing his books, just like his father before him. And so naturally he expected me to follow his trail. To use the little knowledge cubes that his mind machine produced on the previous round. But those were not the cards that I was dealt in the investigation phase, were they? They were not. So, I had to be like a jazz man and learn how to improvise. And that, my friends, is what you are watching right now. A last-minute desperate pivot. The race to achieve certain landmarks bring a welcome tension to a game that, if you allow me to be brutally honest, the first time that I played it, it was a three-way match with two great friends of mine, great artists, authors of a dozen immortal works of art between them. Well, first time that I played it with them, I was not very impressed. It seemed to lack the spice of life, variety, and I'm sorry again if this makes me sound like a barbarian, like a disgusting brute. But towards later rounds, especially if you play the corporate era variants, each generation of Terraforming Mars seems to go on for years. Like each generation goes on in real time. Yet that night, after a violent discussion about the merits of Arthur Rimbaud's Season in Hell, C+, I went to bed and I could not sleep. I was indecently harassed by a serious case of the no sleepies. All I could think about were the projects that I chose poorly. The projects that I did not have the courage to pursue, either because they were too expensive or because the requirements forced me to only be able to build them years in the future. I could only think about the satisfaction that raising a city right there, north of Solus Planum, would sabotage my writer friend's plans to build his city there. And so I usurped the points awarded by his forests. Yeah. Oh yes, I could not sleep. had to play Terraforming Mars again.
Scary to think how this game can transform a progressive and sensitive human being overflowing with kindness and empathy and start for the common good, such as I am, into a capitalist monster with no scruples nor mercy. It's fascinating to watch, as we are supposed to be working together towards a common goal. For God's sakes, man! The Earth is dying, and it's our fault. It's imperative that we work together towards building us a home before Gaia walks straight into that white light and drags us all down into the eternal oblivion within the darkness, within the void of Abaddon's heart. Yet, that is not what we do, is it? For example, the other day, my painter friend, he had enough greens to build him a nice forest that would raise the oxygen level at one point and bring us closer to move into our new planet. But I did not let him do that, did I? I did not. I took a meteor from the sky and I crashed it against the planet and burned all his crops to the ground. He had been sowing them for generations and generations. They were his grandfather's crops, his grandfather's bush, and I burned it to the ground without thinking twice. Why? Because I wanted my hexagon there. I wanted my forest there. And so I delayed the advancement of humanity for my profit. It was sickening. Sickening. I was filled with self-loathing, and again that night I could not sleep. Woe to the villain, for I am become it.
And that's Terraforming Mars, an epic story about perseverance, human ingenuity, greed, capitalism, hidden behind a cashew, a seemingly dry but nutritious fruit. What do you think about it? What do you think the expansions bring to the table? What is your favorite map? Because maybe this is a good time to open a discussion here. I don't want this to be a review television program on YouTube. I want this to be more like a book club. Except these books come in boxes. They have little cardboard or plastic or wooden pieces and hopefully very few pages. But boy, do they tell stories. I would like to leave you now with a quote from the Martian Chronicles by the great Ray Bradbury. I'm tired. Too much has happened today. I feel as if I'd been out in a pounding rain for 48 hours without an umbrella or a coat. I am soaked to the skin with emotion. Don't forget to subscribe. I have been Jaime Duarte Duart, and I hope to have placed a worker in your hearts and minds.